the building. My name is Meredith Koba, and I'm a broadcasting and digital media major here at Idaho. And on behalf of the students and the faculty of the School of Journalism and Mass Media, I would like to welcome the celebration of the 50th anniversary of KUID TV and Idaho Public Television. It is my pleasure to introduce the Executive Vice President and Provost of the University of Idaho, John Winsek.
Thank you, Meredith. Really appreciate that. I'm very pleased to be here with you on this very important occasion. Chuck Staben, our president, unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. If you look up, you might see the airplane flying over your head right now as he's moving from Portland to Chicago to meet with some alumni in the Chicago area. But he does send his greetings and congratulations on the 50th anniversary. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge an important individual who's joined us today, Don Saltman. I hear you're in the audience. There you are, Don. Don is the president of our State Board of Education, and we're very pleased to have you here with us today, Don. Thank you. It's exciting to recall that public television in Idaho got its start 50 years ago last month, just a few dozen yards away across the parking lot in the Radio Television Center. We're here today to commemorate that legacy, but also to look ahead to the future of public television. News and public affairs, science and technology, arts and culture. On behalf of the University of Idaho, welcome to everyone here who has played a part in making public television in Idaho what it is today. And a special welcome to our keynote speaker, Paula Kerger, whom you will meet in a few minutes. At this point, I'd like to introduce the Dean of our College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences, Andy Kirsten.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Provost Winsek. It's a landmark day for public television and our college and university and our wonderful School of Journalism and Mass Media, which we lovingly call JAM. Idaho's only accredited program for the study of broadcasting, journalism, advertising, and public relations, and I think I have this right, only one of 4 in this region. When the accrediting team visited the campus 2 years ago, it praised the hands-on learning opportunities for JAM students. And in fact, it's the hallmark of our education in the school. Since 1965, students have worked side by side with professionals in the studio, control rooms, and editing booths. Many of these graduates have gone on to very successful careers in radio, television, film, and digital media. We in class are so very proud to be for our partnership with Idaho Public Television and look forward to another 50 years. So on behalf of the college, welcome to all our alumni, members of our JAM Advisory Board who are in the audience today, who are visiting. And next, I'd like to introduce the General Manager of Idaho Public Television, my friend Ron Piezaleski.
Thank you, Dean Kirsten. It's great to see so many familiar faces here to help us celebrate our 50th anniversary. Now, I want to also take a moment and recognize a few special people in the audience. In addition to Don Saltman on our State Board of Education, Idaho Public Television has a Friends of Idaho Public Television board made up of members from all over Idaho, and we have a number of them here with us today. Mindy Cameron and her husband Bill, who not only are board members, but also were part of the Idaho Public Television Employee Alumni Group. And thanks for coming down from Sandpoint. John Gothanet and Joy Fisher, also board members. John's from Orofino, Joy from here in Moscow. So thank you all for joining us. We also have a number of our current staffers with us. Ken Segota, who Ken just missed being here at the very beginning of Idaho Public Television, our chief engineer. Jean Gaylor, who's been here for, I think, more than a decade now, and Jeff Tucker up there, as well as Tina Wright, our development or rather our membership manager, and Jennifer Johnson. Both of them are also alumni of the university and the JAM School. Jennifer is our Director of Development. So, in addition, we have a really special guest with us tonight, or rather today, Emeritus Professor Pete Haggart, also the former KUID station manager, former director of the School of Communications, and his lovely wife, Margaret. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. Stand up and let us give you a good round of applause. Appreciate that. Now, for 5 decades, Idaho Public Television has promoted arts and culture, lifelong learning, and civic engagement by providing non-commercial programming that challenges the mind, inspires the spirit, preserves our stories, and promotes understanding. And our organization's history is not just a timeline with important dates and achievements. Idaho Public Television's journey provides a remarkable perspective, reflecting the issues affecting Idaho's politics and people, our lands, our laws, and the things we love about our communities. It's really our history, our collective stories.
In our look back at the first 50 years of public television in Idaho, we have seen it grow and mature since that first station went on the air in Moscow in 1965. It gave Idahoans a window on the world. Programs like Sesame Street, Nova, and Masterpiece Theater educated, enlightened, and entertained thousands of viewers. KUID also produced hard-hitting documentaries that demanded to be taken seriously. The addition of independent stations in Pocatello and Boise in 1971 meant that many of those productions began running statewide. But after lawmakers expressed dissatisfaction with a program dealing with the state's resource industries, the Idaho legislature in 1982 created a statewide public television system, licensed to the State Board of Education. This unification of the stations was the result of a backlash that lawmakers received from constituents after the legislature had zero-funded public television. With the new statewide system now in place, Idaho Public Television could again focus on the business of programming that addressed the needs, concerns, and interests of viewers in Idaho and parts of 5 surrounding states. Today, Idaho PTV produces programming that touches the lives of people of all ages and income brackets. With almost 75% of its annual budget coming from non-state sources, that's a larger percentage than almost any other state-licensed public television station in the nation. Our programming and live legislative coverage can now be viewed online from anywhere in the world. But it's our network of transmitters and translators that bring our signal to the vast majority of users in this rural state. In fact, consistently, Idaho PTV is the most watched public television system per capita in the nation. For 50 years, we have endeavored to make Idaho Public Television a valuable statewide resource, one that brings citizens together from every corner of the state to make us the gathering place, our state's campfire, where our stories can be told. The challenges we face in the next half-century only strengthen that partnership and our resolve to continue to bring you the quality programming you have come to expect.
So as Idaho Public Television looks back over our life and as an organization, we're sharing not only the timeline and highlights on our website, but we're also collecting the personal stories from the people who helped shape our organization over the years. And you can hear those stories or watch them when you go to our website, but we'll also be broadcasting them throughout the next year. And many of those, I should say, are from University of Idaho alumni and graduates from the School of Communications and JAM. Now let's get to the real reason many of you are here, and that's our special guest, who is joining us from Washington, D.C., flew here yesterday morning to kick off our 50th anniversary to talk about the future of public media and PBS. Paula Kerger is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Public Broadcasting Service, the nation's largest non-commercial media organization with more than 350 member stations throughout the country. She's now the longest-serving president in PBS history. She joined PBS as its sixth president and chief executive in March 2006, and since her arrival has made a particularly strong commitments to the arts, news and public affairs, high-quality content for education, diversity, and the use of new technology to bring public media into the lives of all Americans. During her tenure, PBS has grown its audiences across all genres and has been critically praised and has created critically praised online video portals for general audiences and children alike, as well as innovative digital partnerships with companies such as YouTube, iTunes, Apple TV, Xbox, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. Frankly, you can watch Idaho Public Television and PBS content on any device imaginable these days, from iPhones to iPads to Roku devices, Chromecast, et cetera. And it's all under her leadership that we're moving into the new future. So please give a warm Idaho welcome to PBS President Paula Kerger.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Meredith, John, and Andy, for having me here today. It is really a privilege to not only be here at this flagship university, but also to be part of the celebration of 50 years of Idaho Public Television. It's an extraordinary milestone. And you know, the station's come a long way from the day when it was signed on right here at this university. And you know, when it was signed on, it was really radio with a test pattern. It was broadcast during the summer, and it was run by both the professors and the students. And when it went on the air, it really was a wild experiment with the power of what was then a relatively new medium to entertain, of course, but also to educate and inspire viewers. And I think that it was very important when it came on the air, because it was at a time when television was really inventing itself. Now, in May 1961, a young attorney gave his first address as chairman of the FCC. During that speech, Newton Minow described what he then saw as an emerging television landscape as a vast wasteland, a phrase that would certainly seal his place in the history of broadcasting. And he went on to describe this desert that lay before him, stretching into living rooms from Bangor to San Diego. He said, "You will see a procession of game shows, formula comedies about totally unbelievable families, blood and thunder, mayhem, violence, sadism, murder, Western bad men, Western good men, private eyes, gangsters, more violence, and cartoons, and endless commercials, many screaming, cajoling, and offending, and most of all, boredom." Sadly, I think that many of his comments still hold true today. But Minow was speaking in the days before there actually was a dedicated space for educational television and before there was a PBS. He recently commented at the National Press Club on the anniversary of his great speech that as he looks out on the broadcasting landscape today and sees our work in public broadcasting, he sees it as an oasis. Over the last 50 years, we have proven that television can indeed entertain, educate, and inspire. We've given refuge to the curious among us who strive to learn more and, to use our tagline, to be more. We have quite a legacy in public broadcasting, but as the world changes ever more quickly, we're being forced to think regularly and critically about how we continue to be leaders to serve our communities and strengthen our country. The challenges facing us as a country are, of course, quite immense. There's no doubt that our economy is changing and rapidly. Are we ready? The statistics suggest not. As a country, we only produce 60,000 top engineering graduates, which in absolute numbers is 23rd in the world. Less than 17% of the entire student population is proficient in math or science, even as STEM-related job opportunities are growing 300% faster than non-STEM-related jobs. At the same time, our media environment is fragmented. TV used to serve as sort of a national hearth at the time of Walter Cronkite, when people would gather together around the television set to look at the important news stories of the day. Now there are 800 channels, and I think we can agree that much of that content is not necessarily aimed at inspiring learning and curiosity. Civic engagement is also challenged. The National Conference on Citizenship examines trends in civic participation, and their findings suggest that over the last 3 decades, many indicators of our country's civic health are showing stress. These include trust in one another, connections to civic groups, family and friends, awareness about public affairs, and our trust of and connection to key institutions. I think it's fair to say that we're in an era of profound change in many ways, but particularly in how people consume media. With all of the different platforms that are available, it's clear that people want to experience media in their own way and on their own time. According to Nielsen's latest research, the key takeaway is with all the ways to access TV or long-form content, viewers are actually watching more content overall. As the sources of media continue to multiply exponentially, I think that what will drive media consumption in 2015 and beyond is actually the same as what's driven it in the past, and that's quality content. As the media critic Michael Wolff titled his newest book, "Television is the New Television." Increasingly, he argues, digital media finds that it has to copy old media to create the kind of engagement that otherwise eludes it. With so many choices out there, it's quality, not quantity, that has become the most important metric. What viewers want is what they've always wanted, what you want: good old-fashioned storytelling. They want well-written, intelligent, structured, well-performed, well-produced content. And we want communal viewing experiences, times when we can come together as one to share an experience, whether that's shared on Twitter or on a Sunday in January over the Super Bowl. In order to create this event viewing experience, it's really interesting to see how many new media organizations are moving back towards a focus on high-value content. We see that with Netflix and Amazon's entrance into the content creation business. And it's a growing trend. BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post recently announced their new goal is to enter television. And Yahoo will broadcast the first free global live stream of an NFL game in October. And so even as our definition of what television is continues to expand to encompass different size screens and different services and platforms, I think that high-quality, well-produced media that tells important, compelling stories, in a word, television, more specifically public television, will become more valuable and important than ever. Now, of course, in public television, our mission is not just to drive large viewing numbers. And I will tell you, by the way, that we are, in fact, the 5th most watched of all media channels. That's all broadcast television and all cable. So for those that think that public television is just something that appeals to a small number of Americans, regularly, more than 100 million Americans watch public television every week. But our mission is to use the power of our platforms to educate, engage, and inspire. So as we look at our work in the digital future, we're looking at far more than just how to put content on the latest device. We want to use the power of media to meet the challenges of the future, to educate our audiences, engage with them across new platforms, and to inspire community conversation. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about our work in each of these 3 areas, and especially how we're using media to prepare the next generation to participate in tomorrow's economy, to engage with audiences across platforms to increase reach and impact, and what we're doing to help foster increased civic and community engagement. But I'll begin with the work that I think is, in fact, our most important, and that's to educate our youngest citizens. In large part, the success of our country tomorrow depends upon how well we equip our youngest citizens. One of our most obvious areas of need in our country is our educational system, particularly for our youngest learners. Although numerous research-based studies show significant positive outcomes for children who attend preschool, especially those who are at risk, preschool attendance is still skewed towards the wealthy. At age 4, enrollment in pre-K is nearly 40% higher for children in high-income households compared to low-income households, indicating a sharp divide in access to early childhood education. Right here in Idaho, 68% of preschool-age children are not enrolled in any formal educational program, which is higher than the national average, which is 54%. In order to compete in a global knowledge economy and build America's competitiveness by maximizing our human capital, we have to expand access to early childhood learning for everyone. Given the economic and political landscape, we can't just throw money at the problem. Instead, we have to leverage resources and infrastructure that are already in place in order to provide more children with access to early childhood. Public media, I believe, is one of the most promising ways to help address the program. For decades after it was founded, we are still the only media organization dedicated to helping all Americans reach their full potential. Because of our local stations across the country, we are accessible in almost every home in every community across the country. That means that every child, no matter whether they live in a house without a computer or a book, has access to high-quality content if they have access to a television set. In fact, in the course of a year, more than 80% of all children ages 2 to 8 watch PBS. That's great reach, and I'm proud of the fact that we're reaching so many children, but I think that also gives us a great responsibility to be able to do more than create a safe place for children to spend time, but to also create a space where kids are excited about learning, as well as learning basic skills that will help them succeed once they enter the classroom. We have, over the past couple years, stepped up our efforts to help children learn basic math literacy, and that is to address the need that I talked about earlier and the number of children that we hope will achieve skills that will help them should they decide to pursue jobs in the STEM areas. We just recently added a new show, Odd Squad, which has 2 young characters who use math skills and collaboration to investigate weird and unusual phenomena. And by following along, children master those math skills as well. That joins Peg Plus Cat, which joined our airwaves last year, which is basic foundational math concepts and skills. We've also developed all of these projects through transmedia games and apps. So no matter how children come to us, whether they come through television or whether they come through a smartphone, they will have the opportunity to learn basic skills. We've also been focusing on social emotional skills. That's not ABC's 1, 2, 3s. That's the kind of skills that, frankly, we all benefit from. Skills like persistence, self-control, managing feelings. There are days when I want to go back for a tutorial, I have to tell you. But if you talk to people that work with children in the classroom, they will tell you that it's actually the children that master those skills and come to school ready and excited to learn, but also can control themselves in the classroom. Those are the children that actually have the greatest potential for success. And so we're looking at all of these various aspects together in order to give children a better opportunity as they make their path through life. We are also looking at the power of media directly in the classroom. For years, public television's programs have been used by teachers who very carefully will acquire our videotapes or our DVDs and find exactly the right place to forward along to bring that content into the classroom. Using broadband technology, we've created a service called Learning Media, which is a free service, by the way, that's available to teachers, students, and homeschooling families. This is classroom-ready material that is organized by grade level and by subject, and it's brought to schools by teachers across, by our stations across the country. We work directly with teachers to create what I think is the most important work that we can deliver to teachers, which is content that brings the education experience to life. But what is the most important innovation of all? We're drawing on our partnerships to deliver content from not only our public television producers, but with other organizations like NASA, the National Archives, Library of Congress, and Smithsonian. And so these media objects, which are video, digitized objects, animations, and other lesson plans, are all available. And in fact, it is a teacher in Idaho, Jules Shea, who's a sixth grade teacher in Potlatch, who not only is using learning media in the classroom, but in 2015 has been named a digital innovator as one of the most innovative teachers using new technology. She's using learning media to help her students develop leadership skills and turn her classroom into a hub of digital learning. I am really excited about all of this work, and I know Ron is as well, and we're looking forward over the next couple years as Idaho Public Television looks to its next 50 of ways that we can use learning media as a platform to allow us to do even more. Now, in addition to the work that we're doing in school and in the classroom, we're very much focused on the wider needs of our communities. When I started as CEO of PBS in 2006, we were mostly taking content that we had created for the air and then putting in all these various platforms. But I realized that we were missing an important opportunity to connect to new audiences, especially to those who were increasingly turning to the web and mobile devices. At the time, it seemed a bit overwhelming. People were using lots of different platforms and were also spending more time in places like YouTube. So we rethought our strategy and we put in place a new culture starting with web-only content that was created specifically for the web. We looked at the opportunity to begin to talk to people who were working in places like YouTube to create original content, particularly for our own digital platforms. We started producing web original series. We have now more than 60 on our air. And it allowed us to do a couple things. One is it allowed us to experiment with new ideas that we can play around with on YouTube. It allowed us to try different types of content at different lengths and different formats. It also gave us an opportunity to connect to a whole group of people who were actually turning to places like YouTube as their primary source of information. And for us, it's been tremendously successful. When we started, we did this project that some of you perhaps have seen. It was a remix of Mr. Rogers. It was kind of trippy. It seemed kind of weird to me. We put it on the web, and within 24 hours, it had gone absolutely viral. And from then, it's been just a cascade of different projects that have truly caught fire. So far, we've won 3 Webby Awards, and we have more than 5.4 million subscribers and 20 million monthly views. So I think clearly we found a path for us. And the thing is, it's high-quality, engaging content. It appeals to a much younger audience. And many of the pieces that we create are also used directly in the classroom, so it links completely back to what we're already doing through learning media. We're particularly interested in how we can look at helping our stations, both television and radio, continue to be strong media organizations in communities. I travel all over the country. I've been in communities, many of whom the public television and public radio stations are the last locally owned and operated broadcasters. Why does that matter? I think that we're very different from any other media organization in that we draw our strength from the communities we serve. According to one estimate, 25 years ago, there were approximately 50 companies that owned the vast majority of American media, including newspapers, magazines, books, movies, radio, and TV programming. Today, that number is basically 5. And so if you can count on one hand the number of companies that control virtually everything we see, hear, and read, I think you understand why having a local media organization that is run by people that live in this community, and in fact in this community mostly were trained at this institution, I think you understand that these are people that truly understand the needs of Idaho. We just spent a few minutes with a few students, and one of the things that Ron said to them when asked, what do you look for in hiring? He said, I look to hire people from Idaho, because those are people that truly understand this community. They understand the issues and the culture and can help us build the kinds of media experiences that truly create opportunity for this state. And so I think as we look forward, I think that kind of connection locally truly does make the difference for a station like this. And you know what? It pays off. Idaho Public Television, if you were watching and paying attention during that video, which of course you were, is the most watched PBS station per capita of any public television station in the country. More than 1.5 million people additionally went to the website last year. I think it says a lot about your state, and it says a lot about the people here, but it says a lot about the people at the station who are focused on making sure that the work they're doing is relevant and important to what you need. And I think that this work is reflective in the fact that for more than 30 years, Idaho Public Television has been the station of record for candidate debates. In 2014, they aired primary and candidate debates for statewide and federal office. The gubernatorial primary debate in May made national news, and the Idaho governor debate was the most watched program, in Idaho for the October sweeps month. I think this kind of local programming is essential to engage citizens in conversation, because it's these conversations that build vibrant community. And I think that the fact that Idaho Public Television, similar to all of our public television stations, values multiple perspectives and attempts to bring that forward creates conversation so that, in fact, there is light and not heat in the conversation about the important issues of the day. We're trying to do the same thing following the great model of Idaho Public Television. Most recently, we broadcast a program, America After Charleston, that was produced for us by our station in South Carolina. That town hall created an opportunity not only for people in South Carolina to talk about how that community is attempting to heal and move forward, but through social media, we were able to create an on-air and online conversation so that people could be part of a discussion that was productive and not just people yelling over each other. And I believe that as we look at how we can make a contribution to our national dialogue, this is the way that we create these opportunities, is that we allow people to share their viewpoints in a way with trust and respect. And I think that is increasingly and unfortunately unique in today's landscape. Now, I've talked a lot about change, especially in the context of, digital, and why I think it's important to point out that even in times of rapid growth and evolution, there are some things that cannot change, and that is our basic values. I think no matter how much our tools and our strategies and our platforms evolve, there is one thing that we need to remain relentlessly focused on, and that is our singular mission. I know I've shared a lot of statistics with you, and I thought that I would conclude with one more, and from my perspective, it's the most important one of all. It is the following. According to a national survey for the 12th consecutive year, the American people have ranked PBS as America's most trusted public institution. This trust has been forged by more than 4 decades of public service, and it represents a special bond not just with PBS, but with stations like Idaho Public Television and the community. I think, and I am very proud of the trust that the public places in us, but I think it also represents a call to action. I think that if we believe that together we can make a difference in the lives of citizens everywhere and transform how they experience the world, I think we need to make sure that we continue to stay focused on another element that was in Newton Minnow's famous speech. When I think about that speech now and I reread it, and I've reread it many times, particularly over the last few years, he talks about something beyond the vast wasteland, which is what's often quoted. What he talks about is a call to service in the public interest as an obligation of television. He challenged broadcasters to put the people's airwaves to the service of the people and the cause of freedom. And as we look forward to the future of media, and particularly the future of public media, it's that service and cause that needs to drive our work forward. Our work in public television cannot be replaced or replicated by commercial outlets. I often like to say we're really not in the same business. We use the same tools, but we, in fact, are very different. Our focus and our mission is to exist to serve the people and not to sell to them. Our bottom line is the number of lives that we touch, not the number of shareholders we enrich. And so even as the future may change, and even as we strive to figure out how to take the best advantage of evolving technology, it is in fact that call to the service of people and the cause of freedom that should bind us together and motivate us to continue to do our great work. And all of that is possible, my friends, because communities come together to support the work of their great public television stations. I know you've been waiting for this, the fundraising pitch at the end of the speech. That is what one comes to expect in public television, and you're going to not be disappointed. I'll give it to you, but in a very nice way. Public television stations exist in this country because people care. It is what people did when they put this station on the air. They recognized that this is something that could be very powerful, and they banded together and put the station together for the people of this great state. The station has remained strong because you have stood next to it through thick and thin, through good times and bad times. And 50 years is an extraordinary accomplishment that you should feel great pride. I do see many public television stations, and I will tell you, this is one of our country's greatest. It is not an accident that the station has the largest audience of any public television station. But the success of this station is now in your hands. That's all the fundraising pitch I'm going to give. You can figure out what that means. And so just please know that your participation does, in fact, make a huge difference. If you care about the future of what this station can do for this community, then you can do a couple things. You can get involved. You can volunteer. You can certainly support its work. And you can believe in the possibilities of what it does, because with that belief, as worked for Tinkerbell, magic happened. So thank you for 50 years of great magic, and let's look forward to 50 years of more. And now I'd be happy to take any of your questions. Thank you. There's one right there. Thank you for asking a question so quickly. Otherwise, we have that awkward moment where, everyone sort of looks down and no one knows what to do and so forth. There you go. Now you got the mic.
Well, first of all, thank you. I've been watching PBS since I was a kid, and I'm not talking about Sesame Street. I love Masterpiece Theater, Frontline, and especially Nova, and at a young age. And so, thank you for your service. But I have a brief statement and a quick question. As I know you must know that since 1997, multi-billionaire David H. Koch and his brother have donated nearly $100 million to organizations dedicated to climate denial. And he also is a political force behind a pledge in Congress to have, at this point, a quarter of the Senate and 1/3 of the Congress to sign the pledge not to fund any climate change actions unless there are equal amount of tax cuts. And so my question is, there has not been, since March of 2009, one show on Nova concerned with the science of climate change or the issue of climate change.
That's actually not true.
Well,
They've done multiple shows.
I have the entire list here of the shows on Nova since 2009. And so my point is, 99% of climate scientists and scientists in general who are published in peer review scientific journals agree that this is an issue of just unbelievable significance and something that threatens civilization as nothing before. And so I just feel that when David H. Koch is sponsoring NOVA, that undermines the trust that you were closing your speech with.
So-
And so I just don't understand that.
So I appreciate your comments, and I want to make a couple comments of my own about it. So we have not shied from programming dealing with climate change across a variety of programs on public television, including Frontline, which is, I think, our greatest program on public television. And I mention it for two reasons. One, because I believe it, and if you look at any of the speeches that I've given, you'll know that when I'm asked my favorite show, I'm always embarrassed because you pick one and everyone else is upset. But I genuinely believe it's the most important show that we do in prime time. It has huge resonance, it has changed public policy, and it has done a series of pieces on climate change. And NOVA has done programs on climate change and actually has one in development. The issue that I have, and I've not made this statement publicly, but I will. The concern that I have about funders, and I will say a couple things about it, and then I'll come to the statement I haven't made before, and that is that the lion's share of funding for public broadcasting comes from lots of people. And we also have some major donors that support funding, and we also get some money from corporations. And that's what's made public broadcasting strong, is that we get funding from lots of sources. I can tell you certainly there is no editorial interference from any funder, because that would compromise our ability to raise money from the masses, and that is because of the trust. And we do pay attention very carefully to the discussions around funders. I do have an issue about not accepting money from someone who we may have a disagreement over their beliefs, because I think that's a slippery slope. Now, do I agree with David Koch and his opinions? Not necessarily. But I also, there are people who give us money from other places that I may not disagree with theirs either. I think we're a democratic organization. I think if we allow funders to affect our editorial policy, you have every right to stand up and be angry with us, and you should. And you should speak loudly. But I do feel that if you look at our record of the programs that we produce, we are not shying away from this issue, and I pledge to you we will not, because I agree with you, this is one of the most significant issues of our time, and we need to make sure that we are talking about it. I will add one more thing. In the time that I've been at PBS, and particularly over the last few years, we have put a significant effort into beefing up our work in science and natural history. And the reason is because I believe that our country is woefully uneducated about science. And so on Wednesday nights, we created a night where we put Nature and Nova and other science series together. It is the area that is getting the biggest investment from a range of funders that are attempting to bring science to the American public. It is also a huge emphasis for us for children, particularly for girls, because there's so much data about the fact that many girls shy away from science and they shy away from math because they're discouraged from it. So we are serious about making sure that all Americans understand the importance of science and the importance of science in our lives. And that, I can tell you, is a steadfast commitment. And I'd be happy to talk to you during the reception if you want to talk to me a little bit more, because I understand exactly what you're saying to me.
Thanks very much for coming today. I would like to disagree just a little bit. My favorite show is the NewsHour.
I'm sorry. See, this is why when I say Frontline, people always get upset.
Though I love Frontline as well.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm curious what you as an organization have learned about the migration to digital media in the case of the NewsHour. I know 4 or 5 years ago there was a push to a lot more content online, and I'm wondering what you've learned about how we as viewers are using that content, and some things maybe that you might add about future directions of the NewsHour
Yeah.
with online media.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
I'm delighted that you are watching NewsHour and are a fan. I will say to you that, you know, in the last year and a half in particular, the NewsHour has evolved in that we have a new executive producer, Sarah Just. Obviously, we have Gwen Eiffel and Judy Woodruff. I would say even in this day and age, it's stunning to me that they are still the only women co-anchors of a national nightly news program, which again seems hard to believe in this day and age, but in fact that's true. And I think that what we've tried to do with, because I'm coming to your digital question in a minute, what we've tried to do is actually look at the NewsHour holistically. So with the broadcast itself, it's not just that we've changed the set and brightened up the music, and it needed it, but what they have worked on is, one, getting it outside of the Beltway, doing a lot more field pieces, bringing in more journalists and more partner journalistic organizations. I didn't talk to the journalism students about this earlier today, but I think increasingly in journalism, at least for us, we're doing more and more partnership. So working with public radio, of course, but also working with organizations like ProPublica, working with print, working with other broadcasters. We actually just won both an Emmy and a DuPont work for a project we did with Univision. I think that leveraging the journalism that is on the ground in places and with people that have voice that are in communities, I think is really powerful and important. So, you know, without upsetting the apple cart, really focusing on stories that are important, but also making sure that those stories are told in a way that's engaging. And so that's been the broadcast piece. The digital piece has been really interesting, because, as you might guess, the audience for broadcast television news is older. Usually I say our primetime audience is over 50. I will have to tell you the news audience is significantly older than that. The audience for the NewsHour online, average audience is 35. And so I think that what we are learning from our experiences is that people are coming into news because of stories they're interested in. They're also coming into NewsHour on a regular basis for journalism, and some of them are actually online and watching together, so it's not one or the other. But more are coming one place or the other. So there are more people that are watching television alone and watching the online piece alone. And we thought there would be more crossover, and there's not quite as much crossover as we thought, though there are people that use both services. So I think that the digital team that's been working on it, and actually a lot of the digital innovation came from Hari Srinivasan when he joined as one of the anchors. And as we look forward, we're looking to try some things, particularly as we go into the election. And we'll look to do some things cross-platform between radio, our work in television, but also leveraging local stations. And that was something that was always a challenge with the NewsHours, really figuring out how to better leverage the journalism that happens in communities across the country. And so both through the digital space, which is an easy way to link, but also bringing some of those stories into the broadcast, I think we're able to continue to increase both the relevancy, but frankly, the rigor of the journalism that we're using. So it's an interesting space, and it's an evolving one.
Our students, any JAM majors who would like to follow up on anything you heard? If not, I've got a question here in the front row from our state senator for District 5, Dan Schmidt.
I was hoping that would be anonymous because my question has to do with another funding question, and that has to do with state funding. Mm-hmm. And the introduction that we got from Ron described Idaho's difficulties with funding at one point, and I was hoping you could, maybe you have some awareness of other states' possible issues with funding. And then the question that you addressed about where funding comes from and how that may influence programming.
Yeah. So the thing about public television that I think most people don't understand is that I don't actually run a network. So the best way to describe this is Ron does not work for me, I work for him. So all of our stations are independent. We were actually created by stations in order to do things at scale for them. And every station is a little different. So some stations, particularly in the West and some in the South, are actually, were created and supported by the states. And so not every public television station gets state funding. Now, I came from New York. I was in our station in New York City. We actually got a significant amount of money from state funding. And the stations all worked together. And that money came to all of us, and it was mostly used for educational purposes. I know the state funding here is for infrastructure. It's to make sure that every person in the state, whether you live in a well-populated area or a more rural part of the state, you're able to receive public television. It's all about access, which is profoundly important. In fact, a lot of the state funding was really to help support access. The story is mixed. There are some states that were big funders of public television and have scaled back, and others have gotten back into funding public television. So there isn't one answer about the state of public television in terms of state funding. Federal funding has been level for the last few years. This year, actually, the funding and the funding from the federal government actually goes to our stations. It doesn't come to PBS, and that's also important to know. It represents about 15% of the funding for public television nationally. 15, not 50. And then the rest of the money we raise. And most of the money that comes into public broadcasting is not from corporations, it's not from foundations, it's actually not from major givers. So we're different than, again, a lot of other nonprofit organizations. Most of the money comes in very small contributions from a lot of people. So when I refer to public television as in many ways being the most democratic of institutions, I literally mean it. It is a lot of people. It's a lot of tote bags and mugs, let me tell you. It's a lot of people who step in together. And I think coming back to the very first question is the thing that is, I think has been very important for us as a system, is that we do receive lots of contributions from people, and so everyone has a stake. And I think that does keep us on a certain path. And when we do make mistakes, and we do, I think more times it's the optics of mistakes than actual mistakes, then we need to pay attention, because that broad base of funding is only possible if people believe in the integrity of the work that we do. That's why it has to be of paramount importance. Does that answer your questions, sort of?
So if I can jump in just in terms of the other states that are structured the way we are, where the state actually owns the license, where you're a state agency the way we are, we get the least amount of funding of all of them, both on a pure dollar standpoint, and many of them are states much smaller than we are in terms of population and in terms of geographical area.
There you go.
I have a quick question about programming that kind of piggybacks on the idea of each independent station. But we were watching a wonderful documentary about how enforcing immigration laws splits up families, and it was very moving and inspiring. For 30 years, we've been watching PBS in Houston, and I just don't feel like we would have seen that at the Houston station, and wondered who gets to make the decisions about which documentaries are chosen and which states present them, or which stations present them.
The decision of what ends up on the stations is made by the station. So we put together a schedule which we feed out. There's a certain amount of the programming that we produce that most of the stations agree to carry. But ultimately, the decisions are made by the station. And again, that's why I think it's important to understand this is very local. And I worked at a station, so I can tell you when I didn't put something on the air that people wanted, I would hear about it. And, so I think it's just important that someone locally is making the decisions based on their understanding of the community, of what that community wants. And that's how we're set up. Now, there was a student actually right here that had a question, right in the middle with the glasses. I was waiting for some of you to ask me to describe the final episode of Downton Abbey, So. I was actually going to joke with you when I stood up and said the big screen's here so I can show you the last episode, but of course that's not true. Go ahead.
So Kenton wanted me to introduce myself. I am Claire Whitley. I work at the student media office. I'm also a journalism major here at UI. But my question goes back to a little bit of programming as well. You mentioned that a lot of, or that you're trying to focus on girls, especially with science kinds of programs, and I was just wondering, two parts, why is that a huge focus, and how are you focusing just on that?
Okay. So the why is that there is, we work with a lot of different organizations, including Gina Davis and her Foundation for Gender Equity, which she started because she was watching television with her daughter and realized, or it at least seemed to her, that most of the images that she was seeing, and I'm talking about G-rated programs, were inappropriate. That girls were portrayed in ways that she did not feel were inspirational for her daughter. So she actually did research. And what she found was in fact true, that the majority of images of girls, and I'm talking again about G-rated television programs and movies, women, the girl characters were inappropriately dressed and were portrayed in ways that were not aspirational. So we work with her. We work with her in our children's programs. The series we launched last year, Peg Plus Cat, it is not an accident that Peg is a girl. It used to be that people assumed that with children's programming that little boys would only watch shows about little boys, whereas girls would watch shows about boys or girls. It's not true. If you have good characters, kids will watch it, girls or boys. And so, but we also know, because there's a lot of research that shows that girls are not always encouraged to pursue careers in math and science. And sometimes that steering is not deliberate. Sometimes it's just as subtle as women saying to their children, I was never good in math, and really sort of dismissing math and science. And so we're really interested in creating role models. And so, and we want girls and boys to see the potential in front of them. So we've made an effort in the characters that we build, Ready, Jet, Go, which Ron talked about, which is launching. Did you talk about it? No, you talked about it earlier. I'm now like in a complete haze. I haven't had any sleep this week. Ready, Jet, Go is a series we're launching in January with the Henson Company, and it is a science show, and it has animated characters. And it has a real-life scientist who is female, who's fantastic. And so it is as subtle as making sure that children see their faces reflected in the characters they see, whether they're animated or real. And then in prime time, we look very carefully at the scientists and that we have in prime time, because a lot of children watch Nova. And a lot of adults watch Nova. And it would be great to be able to profile the fact that there are amazing scientists of both genders. And so that's how we're doing it. We are just looking to, it's as simple as making sure that, actually in the range of our work, both in front of and behind the camera, I want to make sure that people in America see their experiences reflected. Meredith, you're on.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. What you have done for public television and what you continue to do has been truly inspiring. That concludes our program. We hope you will come next door to the Albertson Building atrium for a reception. You may exit from the door to the right through the courtyard behind the administration building. We also need to be out of the auditorium by 4:45 to set up for another event. But again, thank you everyone for coming, and a happy 50th birthday to KUID. Have a great evening.